So this is the Women in Neurosurgery panel. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. We have some fantastic women who are going to be joining us today to talk about this. I'd like to go ahead and introduce some of the ones that I see already. So Dr. Susan Durham, who's the chief over at USC for pediatric neurosurgery. She's joined us this morning. Hi, Dr. Durham. Thank you very much for joining us again on this panel. Appreciate it. Dr. Jocelyn Woodard, she's a PGY7 at UCLA. She's joining us in between rounding and all of her clinical duties, so really appreciate it. She's down at Harbor right now. I believe we also have Dr. Shivani Rangwala. Are you there? I'm so sorry. I'm just.
Can you hear me? I'm also in the car and using my phone, so I'll probably be in and out.
Perfect. Thanks so much for joining us. We can hear you. We also have Dr. Alexander Common, where she is a USC. There.
I'm right here.
Oh, perfect. Great. I'm sorry. I'm just scrolling. All right. And then I think Dr. Maya Harari was able to join us as well. She is an intern at UCLA. She may or may not be rounding still. So, all right. That's okay. We'll go ahead and get started. Okay, well, first of all, thank you all for joining us. If you guys have any questions, feel free to just go on mute and talk with us. This is going to be a more informal chat than some of the previous ones have been. I think we'll start with a couple of pre-prepared questions and then we'll just kind of go from there. So launching right into things, I think one of the biggest concern, one of the large concerns that people have is that there's not a lot of women in neurosurgery, and so you can worry about the culture of a particular program when you decide to enter it. So, being a female neurosurgeon, how do you think that impacted your considerations for entering the field of neurosurgery, if at all? Were there any hesitations that you had, and what were the decisions that you made internally or externally to try and overcome those?
So I can chime in here on this first. Shivani, I'm a third year, wow, not there yet, at USC, and I went to medical school at UIC in Chicago, and one of the big things for me was that at UIC we had a very phenomenal attending program director, Dr. Hanjani, who was very impressive and like a really good role model. And I think that really showed me that it was very possible to, even in a field that was so male dominated, to be a very strong, surgeon, despite, I guess, the disadvantages or whatever you may perceive. And I think I had really good mentors. So I think the biggest thing here is just finding good mentors and making sure they're guiding you towards programs or parts of neurosurgery that, despite whatever perceived notions there are about like the more male dominated specialty, that you can still be a pretty effective and strong resident and clinician in neurosurgery. And I think mentorship is really key. And I think there's more and more residents every year. Like I know at USC, I've heard so many times, I'm sure Alex has heard this too, that because my whole class is all female, and I think that actually we had so many female med students that were interested in neurosurgery after our class matched, and it was just like, I think just helping out each other and finding good mentors and making it easier for those that come after you is probably a good rule of thumb, I guess, in this, if that makes sense. Does anyone else want to chime in?
Yeah. So hi, Dr. Durham. I'll let you go. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Since I'm the oldest one here, I guess I have the most experience with this. So when I went into residency in 1994, I trained at Penn, and I was the third resident that was female that they'd ever had. And I can say that in my 7 years, it was I was treated just like everybody else. And so that made my residency easy, or than what I've heard of a lot of people have gone through. But back then nobody had kids. So, no female resident had ever had a kid. And even like my male counterparts really didn't have kids until they were later on through residency. So there was, no one talked about maternity leave, but certainly no one would have talked about paternity leave back then. So things have really come a long way in neurosurgery. Being a female in neurosurgery, I love it. I think it's great. I think it really is an important role to play as you get further along in your career, because you have so many opportunities to really influence the people that are underneath you. Because I have Alex and Shivani here, who are two of my USC residents, and Alex is actually on the children's rotation with me right now. And just watching the careers of all of the residents that I've trained, both male and female, is awesome. So being a mentor is really a great, responsibility that you have. And I don't think it makes a difference whether your mentor is male or your mentor is female, but it's somebody that is going to shepherd your career and really understand you and help you get to where you want to go. My two greatest mentors in my career were my Sean Grady and Jean Flam, who are both, elderly, white male neurosurgeons, and they have been nothing but phenomenal and supportive of me. And I think, finding a mentor is super important to find while you're a medical student, because that person will be so important to you throughout the rest of your career. If I can give a little plug to you know, sort of influence, getting your visibility out there of female neurosurgeons, I think is super important to, kids to, go to middle schools, go to high schools, go to undergrads, and talk to them about being a neurosurgeon and being a female neurosurgeon, and really showing them that, not every neurosurgeon is going to look like Harvey Cushing for the rest of our lives. It's a very different, picture of what a neurosurgeon is. So that's my 2 cents.
This is Jocelyn. I am a graduating neurosurgery resident over from UCLA. I'm going to try to address some of the questions that have come up in the chat thread in particular. On the decision to go into neurosurgery or not, just because you are a female, those are not mutually exclusive. As you have seen, there are so many examples of women in our field who are doing very, very well and doing amazing jobs, both at their career and at being a mom or being a wife. Realistically speaking, if you're a woman who's interested in neurosurgery, you're probably very driven, you are accomplished. There is a commitment that you would give to your career regardless of what that career would be. And so the same circumstances that you would experience probably in anything that would fulfill you, you would equally experience in something like neurosurgery. The benefit of it, though, is that at least you are doing the work that you love and something that really drives you and gives you energy, and then that is displayed to your children or, to others who are around you. And so the biggest thing is really just deciding that this is really what you want to do, regardless of necessarily what the sacrifices are. It is true that at times on the interview trail, you might be asked questions of whether you want to have children or not. And you might be asked questions about your family planning. Even if that question doesn't come directly, you might get it indirectly. And it is appropriate for you to have whatever answer you feel fits you. What they're really looking for is for you just to demonstrate and say, like, I am committed to this, regardless of the other things that are going on in my life, because everybody has something. I will also say that I went to Stanford Medical School, and so I gratefully had so many wonderful examples of women who were just forces of nature and amazing forces already as residents within the field of neurosurgery, but had also had children. I went to a program, though, that had very few women. When I arrived, I was the only one, and a woman had never had a child in residency. And at the moment, that is still the case. But even within my program, as more women have gone into the program now, like, everybody's like acutely aware that at some point a woman is going to have a child in residency. And they're already making contingency plans on that to figure out, like, okay, if this does happen, she should be allowed to do that, especially given the fact that, like, so many men in our program have had children. And as Dr. Durham alluded to, there are now systems in place for paternity leave and maternity leave, so that those are equally acceptable options no matter what your gender is. There was one more question on the thread in terms of if you're at a program where you don't necessarily have female mentors. If you have gender-specific questions that you either feel uncomfortable asking of your male colleagues, there are so many people within the WINS network, or even on, you know, this little communication that we're having right now, that just reach out to them, send them an email, talk about the questions that you don't feel are okay to ask the people at your program. And I know without a doubt, most of us, as soon as we have the opportunity to check our email, you know, in a large chunk of time that we could really dedicate you to, you would easily and gladly call you back.
Yeah, I can echo that from Joss. Like, you can ask me anything, any question. It's not a crazy question. And there's some questions I'm looking at the chat are about families and, you know, how do you have kids? I have 4 children. I'm 52 years old. I have 4 kids. I did wait a little bit. I didn't have my first till I was 38, and I was already, you know, well established in my practice. But you can have kids. I mean, now, you know, the real requirement during residency is that you have to have a certain amount of months of clinical neurosurgery. And so it may require you to sort of flip, you know, your research years. And there's so much more flexibility in your residency training schedules now that you have non-neurosurgery clinical rotations that you could change your schedule for to actually fit in having a kid. So it's totally doable now, and it's protected by law. And one of the other things Joss was hitting on is about during the residency application, people are not allowed to ask you what your family planning is. If you're married, if you have children, do you plan to have children? Those things are illegal questions. They do get asked, and they do get asked directly. Sometimes they get sort of implied or asked indirectly. But I think it's a good, you know, sort of a good thought experiment to have an answer to those questions already, like, you know, made up in your mind so that you can respond appropriately, because sometimes people do ask crazy questions during the residency applications, like people still think it's like 1965. So you really have to, you know, have a prepared answer to some of those, because you'll be surprised at sometimes what you get asked still. Alex, you've been very quiet. Do you have anything to add about being a female in in residency?
Yeah, I have a couple things. When I applied, you weren't here yet, so there weren't any female faculty members at that time. But I mean, I found that there's plenty of, within at least USC's program, male faculty members that were just as supportive as I could imagine a female being. Of course, they couldn't lend like firsthand sort of experience, but they were just as supportive as I think anyone could have been. And then to touch on the asking of forbidden questions, when I was applying in 2016 for the 2017 class, that was the year that Trump got elected, and I was asked several times who I was going to vote for and things like that, which I sort of took as a sort of backhanded way to sort of figure out what my values were and where I fell on that spectrum. So it's just, you're definitely going to get asked things, I think, especially by older faculty members and things like that, but you just kind of need to roll with it, unfortunately, and kind of plan out what you're going to say beforehand, because it does happen. But it was really rare. It was really rare, thankfully.
Kind of in that same vein, Alex, of rolling with the punches, I guess, as it were. And Shivani, I don't know if you want to maybe chime in on this next question. I know it's a little bit hard for you to interact because you can't really see everybody, but what is an effective way that you guys deal with disparaging comments or microaggressions, either real time or, you know, over the course of your residency or Dr. Durham, your career, things like that? You know, hopefully they're few and far between, but they probably do occur.
They definitely do, and the more micro that they are, the more common that they are, whether it's from co-residents or, you know, nurses, faculty members, whatever. Sometimes you do just kind of roll with it because you're just busy, you don't have time to like sit someone down and like educate them. But oftentimes, unfortunately, as a female in the field, you do have to be like extra nice, because even if you are neutral, you come off as mean if you're if you say the exact thing in the exact same tone as your male resident, then you're mean. So, and you'll get complaints and all this jazz. So there is a component of needing to overcompensate and be extra nice, but then sort of once you sort of show that you are nice, you can then kind of segue into, hey, like the way that you said that like was a little bit, I'm not sure if you realize that you were being this way. Yeah, then you can kind of show them that what they said wasn't good.
Yeah, thank you. I just saw Maya, one of our interns, she hopped on. It looks like she's working from Santa Monica right now. I don't know if you wanted to add anything.
I am. I honestly just heard the tail end of that, but I agree with what Alexandra was just saying. I actually have to go DC a drain right now, so I will be back. Nice to meet everybody.
So I'll just report that those kind of, misconceptions, microaggressions, behavioral things that you deal with as an intern, you'll still deal with, like, even at my age. I still make rounds. I was making rounds with, Dr. McComb, who's a senior neurosurgeon, the other day, and everyone was talking to him and not to me. And it was just, it's the same way. When I was a chief resident, the patients used to talk to the intern because he was male and ignore me. And so, you get used to, I hate to say you get used to it, but you sort of learn, I don't know, you get battlefield fatigue, I've heard it called, where it's just every day, it's like Alex is exactly right. You have to be extra nice so that no one's there. Everyone thinks you're a bitch if you say the same thing that male will say at the same tone. You get, sort of, not very nice responses to that sometimes. So you do have to be it's a little bit of a social skill in reading the environment, and you got to sort of, you will get invited to like all the baby showers and all the wedding showers and everything. Like, I once heard it like, female neurosurgeons are less productive because they have to spend more time talking. So like rounds take longer because people want to talk to you, like nurses want to talk to you, and it just takes longer because there are like certain like just social interactions that are very different for a female medical professional than a male medical professional. And it's just something that you will develop a style. You do sort of get used to it after a while. I mean, I will still see patients in clinic to this day. They will come to see me. I will have my white coat on with my name on it. I will spend an hour explaining what surgery I'm going to do. And then they will look at me and they'll say, so who actually does the surgery? And it's like, your mouth will drop open, but it happens over and over and over. So you do sort of get used to it after a while. It really used to bug me, but now I'm just like, okay, whatever, keep going. Yes, it's me, I'm doing the surgery, I know. But you just, it's one of those things that, there are baby steps that are getting made in neurosurgery, so it's gotten a lot better. When I interviewed in 1994, I interviewed at UVA. They'd never had a woman, and they had never invited a woman to interview. So when I showed up there, like all the secretaries came out of like the cubicles to look at me like I was like a circus clown. And they were like, "You're Susan?" I'm like, "Yes." Is there a problem? And it was just the weirdest experience. And so thankfully, like it has gotten so much better over the years. So nobody like looks at you guys funny anymore. Like no one like hopefully asks like you guys ridiculous questions. But one of the things being a woman in neurosurgery is you just gotta, like Jocelyn said, it's like your passion. It's what you want to do. You can't see yourself doing anything else. I love my job. My job is the greatest job in the world, and I wouldn't trade that job for anything. And so, I think the more and more women that we get into the field, the more and more changes that are going to come, the more female mentors we're going to have to talk to each other. And it's not, I sometimes have had a hard time with like sort of the very hard edged, we have to be, really getting upset about things. So you have to sort of just, infiltrate from within, I think is the best strategy.
Thanks, Dr. Durham. It's all really, really good advice, actually, just for me to hear as a resident as well, who's going through the process. One of the questions that was brought up was, how do you kind of bring this up with other people if you are experiencing, derogatory comments or anything like that, or anything that you feel is inappropriate? How do you bring that up? Who do you bring that to? And then how do you get men to kind of understand what you're going through? Because they might not understand this whole concept of being perceived as mean when you're just, interacting the same way that they're interacting. Jaws, I know that you talk about one of our co-chiefs with this kind of thing a lot. You guys kind of compare your experiences. I don't know if you want to comment on
that. Sure. So it's interesting in the concept of whether you are experiencing things from like a microaggression standpoint or whether there's just like huge, obvious pushes against you being a woman. And I think within the global context of what everybody's going through in the country right now with like Black Lives Matter, for example, is that the conversation is very much the same, no matter what inferiority is being put on you for a various characteristic that you do not control. A lot of that really comes down to, it's hard to push back on those situations because people's ego is a really big thing. And you want to make sure that you do so in a respectful way where their ego is not bruised or where that negative emotion that they are experiencing is then not pushed back on you. And so it makes it kind of a difficult and very thin line in order to figure out how to cross it or not cross it for that matter. What has been successful for me and within talking to my junior residents is, again, be prepared for these situations. Decide in advance how you are going to deal with it. And even for yourself, maybe come up with either some like one-liners that you can rapidly say. I think one of the most common things that I heard as a woman coming into neurosurgery would be quips from my fellow residents on "that's what she said." And my really common response was, "You wish," because it kind of, deflected it. It was funny. And at the same time, I was still participating in the situation. And then as I formed better relationships with them, I was able to have those one-on-one conversations. People are more likely to be defensive if you correct them in public, whether doing so privately in a different situation shortly after the event occurred. If it's something that emotionally you haven't been able to really deal with in order to talk calmly about, then it's better probably to mend your own emotions and self-soothe before you then bring that conversation up with that person. And it's really never too late to bring that conversation up. Even if you feel like a month or so has passed, you can be like, you and I were interacting a week ago or a month ago, and there was something that like really bothered me, and I thought that I couldn't let it go, and I feel that it's negatively impacting my relationship with you, so I want to talk about it. And most of the time, if you approach people openly and respectfully in a way that their ego is not going to be bruised, they'll be open to that conversation. And then you can follow up with, the next time this happens, like, would you prefer for me to continue having conversations like this in private or in public? You'd be surprised that some people will actually say, I prefer for you to call me out on this in public because I didn't realize I was offending you. Other people may have felt the same way. Or other people may have not noted that it was a problem, and so they need to learn too. So it's a balance. You have to read the room, read the situation, and then just try to figure out what works for you.
I just wanted to quickly give a heads up that we have about 3 minutes left in this session. I've posted a link to the main plenary session in the chat so we can all return to the main session as well.
Thank you.
I want to agree with what Joss was saying. I also think, another way to broach this is you'll also hear them talk about other women in this way around you because they forget you're a woman too, right? They're like, you're one of the boys. And sometimes if you call them out on that, whether it be another doctor or the nurses, anyone really, and you're like, why are you saying it? Like, that's like not appropriate, or would you say that if it was a male resident that was talking to you this way, etc., whatever. It sometimes helps also. And also, honestly, with patients, sometimes patients like talk to their nurses in a way that they shouldn't. And, even if it was said to us, we wouldn't really know how to respond. But like, we also have the role and the ability to stand up for the people around us. And just for the positive note, I'm looking down at the number of participants, right? And there's 78 women here interested in neurosurgery, which is awesome. It's already like, you know, already going in such a good direction. Yeah, Joss. And I mean, that's what's going to make this change. It's all you guys keeping with your passion and keeping at it, showing up, doing the work, loving what you do. Keep doing it. I'm going to go take out that drain. Lovely to meet all of you.
Thanks, Maya. Shivani, did you want to add anything from your call?
I think those were pretty much agree with pretty much everything everyone said. I think those were all really good points. One interesting story I'll share really quickly that happened last week, kind of to the token of Dr. Durham saying that, like, at the end of her conversation of consenting patients are always like, well, who's doing the surgery? And I have had that happen a lot too. And I am sure everyone in this chat, every resident has had that happen at some point or the other. But I actually had a patient the other day that was, which doesn't happen that often, but it was really nice to hear. And I think this is going to happen more and more as, like, in general, women are permeating lots of different specialties. I had a patient that was a very accomplished lawyer in a very male-dominated like law enforcement specialty, and she was so excited for me to be her like surgeon or part of the team that she went out of her way to, like, talk to me and compliment me, and despite over the attending that's done her previous surgeries. And it was just like, I think she really liked that. And a lot of times you'll find that female patients will also kind of be a little bit more excited when, as their surgeon, you know, you take ownership of their care and help them out. So one thing to do, even in this world of, like, microaggressions and all these things that we're dealing with as residents and as female physicians, is to, at the end of the day, just do what's best for the patient and, like, really take ownership of that and, you know, stand by that. I think that really helps throughout all of this.
Hey everyone, Ryan Rad here from neurosurgerytraining.org. If you like that video, subscribe and donate to keep our content available for medical students across the world.